When I was 16 years old and I began taking interest in jazz after listening to some records that a friend of mine in Haifa, actually his father, had at home, and I started imitating Oscar Peterson, etc. There was no source where you could learn something except self-work, imitating, listening, trying to learn. And it struck me that there is no teaching, there is nothing. So after I was already, quite known as a jazz pianist in Israel, I met with Dr. Michal Zmora Cohen. She was a prominent figure in the musical life in Israel, not in jazz. And we were speaking, and she was an open-minded lady. She was the head of music department at the Israeli radio. And she asked me, what happens, there's no teaching of jazz. And I said, yeah, you're right. I think we have to do something. Then 2 years later, she became head of the Academy of Music and Dance in Jerusalem. And one day, out of the blue, I get a phone. Phone rings. Danny, this is me, Michal. Come to Jerusalem and open a jazz department. Next academic year. This was 1980. So I did that. Well, you ask me, how did I know how to organize? Well, by imitation. I learned. I looked around, I saw books and I saw courses that they do in America, mostly in Berkeley, and I adopted the general structure of a jazz faculty for 4 years studying. And it's an academy, so everybody who graduates is a music bachelor, has a degree, academic degree. So we started just high. It's funny that till now, this is the only academy in Israel that you can get a degree in jazz. So many years have passed. But that was the beginning. Now, the academy, the teachers in the academy didn't like it very much. But Michal said, you have to do with this, because the whole orientation of the academy till then was classical music. And we were like a subversive force. But with the time, they saw it's becoming more and more popular. And I consider this very important, this step very important, not because I did it, but because this was the beginning, actually, of proliferation of jazz education in Israel. This was the first school. But right after that, in year 85, some teachers from the academy left and went to Tel Aviv and started Rubin School of Music. I guess you heard about it from Guri yesterday or what? Yeah. So, not many years after, a jazz department started in Tel Aviv, in Tel Mayelin, and on. Secondary school, Gymnasium Ironi Aleph in Tel Aviv had a faculty, not a faculty, studies of jazz, and more and more schools opened. Now, when I'm traveling to New York, and I just, walking in the village from club to club, in each club I find Israeli playing, youngsters. And people, friends of mine, Americans, ask me, what's happening in Israel? With jazz, it's a jazz country, jazz-oriented country. The students are only playing jazz or what? I say, no. But what happens is that we have a lot of talent, and the young people who study in high schools, some of them become very, very known in the world, very successful. And this is actually starting from the Music Academy in Jerusalem. I see the Jerusalem Academy as a catalyst of education, jazz education in Israel. I want to speak now about another activity that also helped proliferate the jazz life in Israel, which is also something that I was involved with. This is the Eilat Jazz Festival, Red Sea Jazz Festival. This was also something that came to me out of the blue. I get a phone one day from the Israeli Cultural Ministry. They asked me if I'm ready to establish a jazz festival in Eilat, from all places. And I asked, why Eilat? Why not Tel Aviv? They say, listen, the mayor of Eilat thinks that Eilat, is a dead city. There's no activity, no cultural activity, and he wants something. And somebody raised the idea jazz. Say, okay, let's do a jazz festival in Eilat. So the first year, I had a budget of $25,000, and I went to the States to recruit some groups. Of course, the first people I turned to were Jewish jazz musicians. The jazz community in the States is, the majority are blacks, the second majority are Jewish, and the third are Italians, and et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of Jewish great players, there were and there are, and I tried to recruit them because I didn't have enough money to pay to the known groups of Gentiles. And the first festival, I also established a practice which hold it till I left the festival. I don't know what's going on now, but I was head of this festival for 22 years. The number of guest groups and the number of Israeli groups must be equal. It's a festival, Israeli festival. So it's international. The Israelis have to be there in great numbers. So in the first festival, we had we had the Brecker Brothers. I have the list of all the groups, if I don't remember somebody. I'll tell you exactly. For our first festival, it was fabulous. Okay, the Brecker Brothers, Mel Lewis and Friends, Red Rodney, Dave Liebman's group, Ronnie Kuber, and last but not least, Tito Puente, because I brought also Latin.
He's a Gentile.
Sorry?
He's a Gentile.
Yeah, he is.
No,
If I'm stopping here, I'll tell you, this is a curious thing, it's a very nice. I spent all the money, $20,000 for all these groups. So each one came for almost nothing, And I had left 5,000, which I said allocated for trying to bring Tito Puente. And I went to meet his agent. So I come to the office, and I say, listen, I'm from the Red Sea Jazz Festival. You know why I'm to the Red Sea? I took it from the North Sea. I say, everybody knows the North Sea. Let's call this the Red Sea. It might, impress somebody. And I say, I'm from the Red Sea Jazz Festival, and we want to have Tito Puente. He says, what can you offer? I said, we need him for 2 shows, and I can offer $5,000. And he looks at me, he takes out a ledger from there. Take the ledger, you can look at it. If you'll find one contract where he he did a show for less than 15,000, one show, then you get him for nothing, for free. I say, listen, I don't have to look at this. I believe you. So what do we do? He says, nothing. Drink the coffee and let's go together tonight. There is a good show. We go together. I said, listen, I had an idea. I saw this guy is a Latino. He's on open shirt and a big cross here. I said, listen, I think he's religious, Tito Puente. And if he'll come, we'll take him and you to all the holy places, all the places, Bethlehem, Nazareth. I see his eyes popping up, like this. And he says, you know what, I'm going to phone him. So he phones and he speaks Spanish. I don't know a word in Spanish. But I don't hear a word no. Yeah. He shuts the phone and I say, what's happening? He says, wait a minute. Pushes the button. A girl comes in. He says, call all the workers to come here. Now, his office was like, a cabinet. It's small, very small. People cannot. He and me and one more, and that's it. So all of them came, popped up with their heads inside. He says, look at this guy. He's the only guy in the world who got Tito Puente for 2 shows for $5,000. So that's a story. Anyway, the festival first year was a disaster economically because we did it in October. It was cold. And people, though it's in Eilat, people just frozen. And we decided, I thought that there won't be any other festival, but the mayor of Eilat.
Was it in the harbor?
Yes. The concept of how you do this festival was developed by a guy named Avi Ifrach, who was the producer. We went together to Eilat to look for locations, and he said, let's go to the harbor. I said, why the harbor? I want to go there. So he came there and he says to me, you see, here we will build this from containers here and there, 4 stages, etc., etc. He envisioned the whole thing, and it was fantastic. So it was jazz in an industrial setting, very, very original. Anyway, after the first festival, I thought this is the end. But the mayor of Eilat said, no, you're going to continue, but let's change the dates. We moved it to August. And from then on, the thing grew up and grew and grew and grew. And from the first year, we used the guest artists, to do classes, master classes. And then the whole concept of master classes for students developed. In the beginning of not in the beginning, I think 2004, we started a jazz camp before the festival, a week, also with artists that we brought to the festival, guest artists from abroad. We came in the early 2000 years. We had like 65, 70,000 tickets sold every year for the festival. So what was important here for us is not just the business of the festival, but the participation of the Israeli groups, which I had a lot of people in Eilat, in the mayor, in the municipality who have to pay for this, support it, didn't like it. They said, oh, we don't need Israeli groups. And I said, this is the concept. So do less. I said, no, exactly the same. If there is 10 groups from abroad, there will be 10 Israeli groups. And it stayed like this. What happened is that the Israelis mixed with the others. There were jam sessions. They met others. It was a launching pad for international careers, for the Israeli youngsters, young people who played in the groups. So it's again, I stressed the educational function of the festival. It was very important for me. The third thing, I was involved in a lot of projects of jazz in Israel, but one of the main activities I did was jazz concert series in Tel Aviv. I started in 92 at the Tel Aviv Museum. The concept was to bring a name artist from abroad and combine him with an Israeli group. And that, so, you know, the concerts, again, was good for the musicians in Israel, and the attractions was there because we brought known people, known jazz figures. We did this till year 2000, and then I moved to the Opera House. It's also an anecdote. Why did I move? The next concert, each series was 6 concerts per year. So my planning for 2000 included the first concert was a pianist, McCoy Tyner. Yeah. So, no, that's exactly. So the people from the museum said, no, we are not going to give you the concert piano. We bring another piano. And I said, why? He says, no, the jazz piano, he'll break the piano when he drinks, he puts water on the piano. I said, listen, are you crazy? This guy plays in all the concert halls in the world. No. I said, okay, you know what? Forget it. I'm leaving. And I went to the opera, and they accepted me. They just hugged me. And they gave me the biggest concert piano they have, the Steinway concert piano. So I did it till 2008, and that's the year I left also the festival and also the opera house, because the concept, you know, was already, you know, exhausted. And I said, if we want to continue with jazz concerts in the opera, we have to bring groups, not one soloist to play with Israelis. Because it doesn't matter how much you prepare, it's never going to be like the original group of the artist who works together with him and brings the whole content. And they said, no, we don't have the money for that, it's too expensive. And then I left also. I said, for me, it's not interesting anymore. So all these 3 activities created a proliferation of jazz life in Israel. A lot of public, which I'm proud of. In the festival, I used to see every summer the same faces almost. Thousands of people I know. And same happened in the series, concert series. A lot of people were buying every year the series, and it was fantastic. Now, the jazz series at the museum still exists. After I left, they continued, and they call it now hot jazz. But in the opera, it continued for 5-6 years, and unfortunately, they don't do jazz concerts anymore. So I guess I talked too much, so I stop here.